Hello, tech guys who invest listeners. Thanks for joining us. In this episode, we are going to talk about no money down, investing in real estate with low or no money down. We're going to talk about that, unpack it a little bit. And if you like this episode, it really helps us out if you give us a good rating. So whatever app you're listening to it on, if you'll just kind of give us a like or a good rating, if you subscribe to us because you like us, that helps us as well. Really appreciate your support. So let's get right into it. Kevin, what do you think about investing with no money down?
Well, Adam, first of all, I'm a marketer at heart, and the marketer in me loves the tagline no money down, little money down, because there's this huge misconception or this big fear that people have when it comes to investing in anything really, but more specifically real estate, that you have to have a lot of money. And that isn't the case. But is it really truly a no money down business? I would argue that it's not. There's, and we're going to kind of dissect that a bit more. When we talk about no money down, a lot of it really pertains to not having any money into a deal, but there are back end costs associated with getting that deal, marketing costs, the systems, operational costs. Those things are there. So if you look at just the transaction, no money down can fit. I've done it with a performing note of mine where I had no money in the deal, technically speaking, but I paid money to set up the podcast, the marketing fees, my VA to help me find the note. Those are all things that I had to do and had to pay for to get that note deal done. But technically speaking, I have no money into that deal. So it is possible, and it's mostly a marketing misnomer, in my opinion.
I have to agree with you, Kevin. And I remember the first rental property I bought. It was such a learning experience, which is one of the reasons that I recommend you take action and begin so you can start to learn. Because no matter how much you prepare, there are going to be things that you couldn't know until you do it. And I just remember all of those little things that you were kind of talking about there that were hidden, not really hidden like someone purposely made it so you couldn't know they're there. It's just things that you wouldn't know to plan for unless you're experienced, that do cost money. And I was thinking to myself, for those people who think they can buy something with truly no money out of their pocket and say they don't have reserves to spend on these types of little expenses, what would they do? I thought to myself, they would be in trouble because there were little things that you don't think about, and they're not even high dollar items, but they could add up, like a for rent sign if you're trying to do it all yourself, right? And a lot of time we could spend a whole nother show on why you shouldn't really do that, but getting started, maybe it's okay as you're kind of learning the business. But trying to do a lot of things yourself, you may be thinking, well, I'll save money that way. I won't spend money that way. You still have to buy a for rent sign if you're going to plant one in the yard, right? If you're going to run ads, I mean, there are free ways to add, like Craigslist and things like that. But if you're going to do any kind of advertising outside of the free stuff, which can a lot of times be a good idea because it helps you get a bigger tenant pool of quality tenants, any kind of marketing. What about things around unit turns? If you buy the property and it's vacant, you have to change the locks on the property. That costs money. Even if you're doing the labor yourself, you have to buy the locks.
Yeah,
If you clean, you have to buy cleaning supplies, right?
absolutely. And then you could also make the argument about your time, how much money that costs, right?
Oh
How
yeah.
much time could you be doing something else? And that's why you put systems in place. But the systems aren't free, they're not cheap, but they are helpful, right? So you do get what you pay for. You can kind of bootstrap this where you're doing everything, but you won't, it will lead to a burnout. I've experienced it, you've experienced it. One thing that I would say is low money down is very, very accurate. An FHA loan, for example, you can get a fourplex, 3.5% down of the sales price. That's relatively low money as opposed to paying 20, 30% for a down payment instead. So you're looking at a factor of 10 when it comes to that percentage difference of paying 3.5 versus 30%. So that's also a possibility. Or partnering up with someone where you find the deal and put a little bit of money in and they front, they pay the rest. You could think of it as also like a down payment, but that's another thing. And then we can talk about, other people's money and the value of that.
Yeah, I agree, Kevin. I think those are good points. And even when using other people's money, it's often very difficult to do a deal if you don't have any of your own money, because most of the time you have to put some skin in the game. People would want to know that you've got some skin in the game on a property, or else they're assuming all of the risk, and that's part of the problem with not having any money and trying to get it done. You've got to find some way to add value to the equation, take on some of the risk in some way. So even if you're doing, say you were fortunate enough to find 100% seller financed deal, which I'm sure some people out there have found, even then that seller will in some way need you to provide something so that they're not holding the bag and taking on all of the risk in that deal. So I don't know what that might look like in that case, but it's got to be something, and usually it's something of financial value.
So to that point, to push back in a way, what you could do is find investors, note investors specifically. So we're talking seller financing. Let's say I approach you, you own your duplex outright, 100% equity, free and clear. There's no note and mortgage on it. Say, hey, Adam, I want to buy it on terms. And you're like, okay, well, I want 20,000 down payment. Well, instead of me paying you 20,000 out of my own pocket, I can find somebody who has money in an IRA that's just sitting there doing nothing, more appropriately, losing money due to inflation and fees, to say, hey, look, we can originate a note. You're coming in as the down payment for me. You're protected in first position or something, however you want to structure it. And then you as a seller would still carry that note. You get your down payment. So there is a possibility of doing it without any of your money in, where the risk isn't really assumed, because you've found the right avatar to target and people who understand that there is a risk associated with it, and they know, like, and trust you. They're not going to think you're going to scam them. They're protected by real estate. So it is possible, and people, to my knowledge, do it quite frequently, but that is definitely more of an advanced thing. uh, you have to learn kind of the nuances of doing that, and it's possible. But then again, I go back to, that's a transactional thing. You have no money down in that transaction. But if you're an active investor, it's really advantageous to look at your investments, and the active investing is a business, and the business is going to have operational costs.
Yeah, I agree that you should look at it as a business, and these things we're talking about are things you could do when you're first getting started and you're learning, and that's part of your goal, is to learn. But they're certainly not scalable. Putting in all of your sweat equity, elbow grease, creativity, spending your time trying to find people that would make this happen, and do those little things, and looking for ways to make sure that you're not putting any of your own money in, which is time consuming. That's all stuff that will work in the beginning, and may not be bad for learning, but it's certainly not scalable. And if you're looking at this as a business, like you recommend, Kevin, and I recommend as well, you want to look at how you can grow that business. You want to be able to scale it over time, and this stuff doesn't do that. So you will need capital at some point to do that.
And there are ways of getting capital, building your network. Or one thing you can do is looking at the assets that you currently have in your portfolio, borrowing against them. I know, Adam, you did something like that with a HELOC. If you want to dive into that, I'll let you do that. But notes, for example, you get a portfolio of notes. Find a lender, whether it's a private lender or an institutional lender, to lend against those notes, because those notes are assets. They are assets on a book, providing you cash flow. They're worth something. And anytime you have collateral, you can find a lender who will lend you against that collateral. So now you can do another transaction to buy where you effectively have no money into the deal. So that's just another option of using other people's money to front, so that you don't have to put any in for your specific transaction.
Yeah, and I like that. I feel like we could almost do another episode on um, money you have that you may not realize you have. You
That's a
mentioned
good
a
one.
good one though, right? Like the equity that is trapped in most people's houses is a great source. And I did that with the HELOC. What I did was I tapped into some equity in my primary residence that was previously locked up and unavailable to me. Through the HELOC, I was able to access it. There are other ways to do that. Another common source for this that most people who listen to our show have and may not realize it's something they can use is their IRA or their 401k,
Mm,
right? There are ways. We've done plenty of episodes in the past on how to use those by getting that stuff out of that traditional IRA, traditional Roth IRA, or 401k into a self-directed type of a plan. So those are some ways that you can start thinking about looking for how to unlock potential capital you've got.
I think we're onto something. It sounds like we should do another episode about money you're not sure that you had sitting around, and it's definitely not under your couch cushion. But you know what? That really wraps up the episode today. We believe that the marketing term "no money down" it's more of a misnomer. It gets your attention, but we could be wrong. And if you disagree with us, we'd love to hear that. We'd love to kind of have some type of discourse around that. It helps us learn. And maybe we can turn that to an episode for our listeners. Send us an email, techguyswhoinvest@gmail.com, or leave us a comment at the show notes at tgwipodcast.com/no money down. And if you like what you hear, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, like and subscribe if you're watching this on YouTube, or if you listen to this on Spotify, Stitcher, wherever. Just let us know. Let us know what you think of the show and any ways that we can improve. So thanks, everybody.